Whew. Holy, holy, holy bleep, everybody. That I think is the only way to appropriately begin the show today because we have the news that Lincoln Riley is headed to USC, not LSU, but to USC. And this is, frankly, one of the most shocking stories we've seen in college football in a very long time. Not just because it is such a seismically large coach moving, because he is moving to arguably a worse job, because just within the last 24 hours, he lost to his arch rival for the first time, and also flat out denied rumors to the other job that everybody thought he would take. Man, this is wild. This is absolutely wild. And I promise you, like, the main tenor of this show is not to just completely rain on Oklahoma, because I've said from the start, like, I do not have near the hatred for Oklahoma in this situation with them leaving for the Big 12 that I do for Texas, okay? But there is some level of karma that is at play here, especially with the way that this played out, in the way that Lincoln Riley did leave Oklahoma for USC in the midst of a West Coast resurgence in recruiting, where, like, that had been the way Lincoln Riley was trying to recruit for Oklahoma and had lined up this great 2023 recruiting class on the West Coast. And in the dead of night was in the back of his mind, I'm sure, thinking, I'm going to take this USC job because it's been open for a long time and everybody knew it was going to be open for a long time. This was not a hard one to see coming at all. Man, there are so many tentacles to this. Like, these are the kind of days I can remember back in my radio career when there would be a massive story, something would happen, and you're like, man, like this, like when Bill Snyder retired, for instance, at K-State, whatever you want to call it, when that ended. Like, some of those shows, it was like, man, these are the days where there are so many tentacles to this story. It's such a compelling story. The subject matter is so great. Everybody's fired up and into it. Those are the kind of days that you really wanted to come on the air and do it. This is one of those days that I want to do that here on YouTube Live, obviously. Okay, Man. I thought this was going to be a fun show already because, look, everything that's been kicked to the back burner here, topic-wise, that I will try to spend some level of time on here today, but everything that's been kicked to the back burner has been like, hey, Cincinnati and Oklahoma State in the playoff is a pretty damn realistic scenario right now. That is a pretty realistic scenario to get both Cincinnati and Oklahoma State in the playoff. All it takes is those two winning and Alabama losing to Georgia, which Alabama almost lost to Auburn, should have lost to Auburn on Saturday. So that's a massive topic here on this channel, but it's going to be buried because of what has happened here with Lincoln Riley and all of the reverberations from that story that will happen all across the college football world for weeks now. For weeks. I mean, this was day one, basically, of the full-fledged coaching carousel with the regular season now over for everybody. So I just can't imagine where all this is going from here, man. It is going to be awesome. Just as a neutral observer fan to watch all of this, it is crazy and it is going to be awesome. So I'll give you a rundown here in just a second of all the different ways that I'm going to go with this. I will take your questions or comments, but I'm just going to give you a heads up. And I see Boom to the Sooner has already hopped in here. Thank you, Boom to the Sooner, for joining in on this chat. I stood up for you on Twitter earlier today, Boom to the Sooner. Someone was trying to come in like, oh, I can't wait to see what Boom to the Sooner has to say. And I said, hey, man, this is a good dude. He's a good dude. So I am not here to gloat in your face specifically at all, Boom to the Sooner. But Boom to the Sooner has donated. And I will say, if you want to make sure that your chat gets in, this is going to be lively. We're already almost at about what the max hits on one of these chats right now. So it's going to be crowded. It's going to be packed. Everyone's going to want to weigh in. If you want to make sure that I see your question or comment, probably going to have to donate tonight. And that means clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. You can do so just like Boom to the Sooner did. And Boom to the Sooner, I have to start out by giving you some credit here. Boom to the Sooner says, I got Bob Stoops back for at least one game. He's going to be coach again. I am determined to will it into existence. You did, Boom to the Sooner. That was, shoot, you'd have to remind me, Boom to the Sooner, like a couple of weeks ago. I can remember at some point within the last few weeks, you coming on here and saying like, hey, well, if this were to happen, if Lincoln Riley goes to LSU, like, does Oklahoma get Bob Stoops back? And I just was like, kind of laughed it off. Like, no, I mean, he's doing his tequila sales thing. He clearly seems to be enjoying retirement. Oklahoma could get about anybody for that job. Not going to happen. Well, now I'm the one that looks foolish here. Boom to the Sooner. You know what? And I don't care if it's just interim, just for a bowl game, whatever. You were right. Bob Stoops came back to Oklahoma. So I I bow to you. I bow to you. That was a great take. And you were right. I was wrong, man. I tell you what. So thank you for being in here. We're going to break down what's going on with your Sooners right now. Will, I see Will has donated as well. Thank you for the donation, Will. Will says it's going to be great to see Oklahoma become a mid-tier SEC team and Texas be the new Vandy. Plus, Cincy and Oklahoma State should make the college football playoff once Georgia kills Bama. Well, that is one of the angles that I want to tackle here on this story, because I was talking to a friend of mine just in a group chat, another guy who covers K-State, and he said basically the same thing. Like, if Oklahoma does not make a hire that's equal to Lincoln Riley, who I think there's no doubt, there's no denying, say what you will about this season, there's no denying the guy is elite. He is an elite college football coach. If you don't make a hire on that same level and you go into the SEC where it was already going to be tougher, like, are they going to just turn into Auburn, a program that certainly is capable of doing pretty good things, but is not going to be consistently nearly at the level that they're at right now? And I thought, man, that's a pretty good question. So I put it to a Twitter poll, like, who in 10 years is the better program? Is it Auburn or Oklahoma? I mean, look, I'm not trying to run down the Oklahoma program at all, because I just listened to a great podcast from The Athletic that had Max Olson on it with Andy Staples, and they were breaking down, like, the reason the Oklahoma job is so great is because there's just been so much stability and everything is really in sync within the athletic department. It's like the anti-Texas, where Texas, you have all these boosters and too many cooks in the kitchen and all these extra pressures and things that I will tell you to the day I die have been the biggest problem and the thing that's really held Texas back, more so than coaching hires, more so than any of that. Oklahoma does not have that. They have a total boss of an athletic director in Joe Castiglione, who does not have things like this happen to him very often. Like getting the wool pulled over his eyes like this by Lincoln Riley does not happen very often at all. So you've got a great athletic director and you've got an athletic department that works pretty well in concert with each other. And you do not have all the extra crap that comes along with being the head coach at Texas, or places like I would suggest in LSU, which Lincoln Riley ostensibly turned down, apparently, to take the USC job. So that is a big factor here. And that is why, like, Oklahoma's search will be fascinating, because I would think that they could pull in almost anybody that they want. And so where does that go? You know, and that's why I found some of the names, honestly, that I've seen thrown out there in this search so far to be kind of underwhelming if I'm Oklahoma, because I would think that this job should generate a lot of interest, a lot of interest. So I see Mama Tiger in here. I see we have an LSU fan. Go Tigers. Congratulations to LSU for the win. I don't know. I would think LSU fans are reeling a little bit right now, right? That Lincoln Riley chose USC over LSU. But hey, I'm not here to rain on your parade. Not here to rain on your parade at all. So that is one of the angles to this. Obviously, one thing everyone's going to be talking about is why. Like, why does Lincoln Riley do this? And is it because he is scared of the SEC? I think the answer to that is absolutely, to an extent, but I don't think being scared is necessarily the right way to frame it. I think it's probably smart by Lincoln in the end. The West Coast thing, Lincoln already recruiting on the West Coast. Like, how long did he have in the back of his mind that this was probably something that was going to happen? And was he kind of playing both sides there, where, yes, lining up talent to come to Oklahoma in the event that he stayed, but also establishing some new inroads and pipelines and getting ahead of the game, so to speak, if he were going to take this job? Hey, I think there's something to that. Who does Oklahoma hire now? Like Brent Venables, Alex Grinch, Cliff Kingsbury, Sonny Dykes, Mark Stoops, all names that I've seen linked already to this job. Is Oklahoma destined to become Auburn or Tennessee in the SEC? I do think that there is certainly a chance for that. Even beyond just the particulars of what happens, like, with Oklahoma. Beyond that, like, what does this mean for the new Big 12? Because there is a piece of this that actually is not good, and that is the piece of the Pac-12 now gaining some life. And say what you will about Stuart Mandel, and I know I've obviously had mixed feelings about him here, but I do always try and say, like, I respect the guy's work, and he is plugged in on the West Coast. And one of the things that he has written up already is, like, how huge of a win this is for the Pac-12. Like, I know that Oregon, Utah, like Kyle Whittingham, Mario Cristobal right now have to be going like, oh man, my job just got so much harder. But at the same time, your league also just became that much more relevant. I don't think that can be understated, like how massive of a win this is right now for the Pac-12 to be able to get this and have potentially a big power now locked down. I mean, think about the difference between the ACC this year and the ACC when Clemson is 11-1 or 12-0 and not 9-3. And that's the difference we're talking about potentially here for what the Pac-12 can be with Lincoln there at USC. So like that, I think is massive and definitely worthy of a lot of discussion. James, I appreciate the donation. James says, go Pokes. Can you confirm that OU still has to pay $80 million even if they wait until 2025? Yes. So the exit fee thing there, that was like the only thing that happens in 2025 is that if Oklahoma and Texas wait until then, they will not have to forfeit the revenue from their home TV games. But the exit fee is still there because you are still leaving the conference. The significance of 2025 is that if they were to leave before that, any money that they made off of home football games would be kicked back to the Big 12 via that contract. So, yes, James and my fellow Oklahoma State fans, I don't know why I say fellow, like I'm an Oklahoma State fan, but James and his fellow Oklahoma State fans that are hanging out here, do let me offer you a congratulations. And if not for this Lincoln Riley stuff, that's how this video would have started. Like, hey, I'm happy for a fan base that it deserves this after, like the whole league has been through everything that's happened since July 21st. You definitely deserve to celebrate that. What a win last night. You're on the precipice of the playoff, going to the Big 12 championship game. So congrats to you, James. But now you get this on top of it. Like you may have just beaten Oklahoma the last time in Boone Pickens Stadium that you'll ever see them there if the game's not played. And now Lincoln Riley's leaving, and Oklahoma could be destined to become an Auburn tier team in the SEC. Like that is, I cannot imagine what Stillwater is like right now. Frankly, I wish I were at Eskimo Joe's. I would shout out Brooklyn's, which was another place I really liked in Stillwater, but I don't think it exists anymore. So anyway, congrats to the Pokes, man. Awesome game. How sweet was Bedlam? Like, just what a football game. Just a crazy, wild football game. Bedlam to a T. There's so much going on, man. I mean, I feel like we could do the show for 4 hours tonight because there's just so much that's happened since I last talked to you. And I talked to you guys on Friday after K-State spit the bid against Texas. So, man. All right, Will, I appreciate the donation. If you want to be like Will, if you're going to get in tonight, you're probably going to have to do it with a donation. I apologize. I don't mean to do that to try and like sucker you in here. I'm just being honest because it is so packed. But if you want to donate, you can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something and get your question or comment up to the top like Will did. Will says, my big hot take is that Utah is the big loser in realignment. USC will break their hold on the South and lose their in-state recruiting monopoly. Utah, I think, does stand to be a loser here. And that's why I said like Kyle Whittingham and Mario Cristobal right now have to just be like, oh, come on, man. Like, USC was probably going to hire somebody pretty good, but it was looking like it was going to be from like the Campbell, Aranda tier of coach. And instead they went up a level or two, perhaps here with Lincoln Riley. So there is that. And I do think that is true. Like Utah will not be able to just run the South anymore. But at the same time, there is that like rising tide lifts all boats thing where, there's some give and take with that for Utah where they needed their conference to still have some tenant power and some school that is going to actually like legitimize them on a national level for them to just retain some of the viability long-term. So I would argue that there is still some good here that comes for Utah, but I don't think it's a hot take to say that like in a lot of ways, Utah is losing here. Short-term for sure, Utah is losing with that happening. So man, I see. Yeah. Blake saying Billy Napier eyeing Jim Knowles as DC for Florida. That would certainly put a little bit of a damper on everything that's happening right now in Stillwater with Oklahoma State. If Knowles were to leave for Napier's staff in Florida, that's another thing. But Florida made a hire today, Billy Napier. No one's talking about that at all. Nobody cares. Florida made a hire, and nobody cares. This is just massive, massive news. Edward in with the donation. Thank you, Edward. Really, really appreciate that donation. Edward says, finally something to be proud of in football as a USC fan. Most online have talked about Riley's awful defenses. Is that true? And should he be in charge of hiring a DC or let the AD help out? Fight on. Well, I will just offer up this, and Oklahoma fans, feel free to chime in the chat if you want to help out Edward or obviously anybody. But, I mean, the knock on Oklahoma for a long time was the defense. They hired Alex Grinch, which was a pretty big hire, pretty big get, a guy who had been at Ohio State, Washington State, and had done really well. Washington State's defense is under Mike Leach. The guy had done some pretty good work, and I think probably gets a courtesy interview for the head job at Oklahoma, right? But I think that would prove to me Lincoln Riley should be able to make the hire. I wouldn't doubt that he can go make the hire, and because the other part of this too now is like Lincoln Riley is widely respected, widely respected. So he'll go out and make a hire and have his pick of a lot of, I mean, it's USC, it's LA, it's one of the best jobs in college football. And everybody always thinks, USC right now has been kind of a dumpster fire the last 10 to 15 years, but that's because things have been a mess there. And if the right people are in place, that's in the discussion for best job in the country. See what Pete Carroll did. So now that Lincoln Riley's there, people will have trust in him. People will have faith that Lincoln Riley is going to do a good job. He'll have his pick of the litter for a defensive coordinator. Like, he will be able to find somebody. So, Edward, if I were you, I would not worry about that at all. I would just be partying, man. I would just be partying. Like, the ultimate shoot your shot moment. Mike Bone, right? Do I have his first name right? Mike Bone, the AD at USC. Shoot your shot. Took his shot with Lincoln Riley. Got it. Made it. You guys need to just be celebrating. I wouldn't stress too much about a defensive coordinator at all. Like, he will be able to recruit talent. He will be able to recruit a great staff. And defensive coordinator, I'm sure, will be included in there. Now, whether or not that's going to be Alex Grinch, that I don't know the answer to, but it will be fine. Maybe that winds up being Jim Knowles. Can we start that rumor here? I'm sorry, Oklahoma State fans. Jim Knowles to USC. Victor, appreciate the donation. Victor, I think you may have a comment that was up here that didn't show there. Victor says, it looks like OU is really hosed. This could take years to dig out from. This could make them not want to leave the Big 12 until 2025. If they leave now, they'll get killed in the SEC. I don't think it's quite that bad. I think the longer term here is where you worry about Oklahoma. I think in the short term, they're going to be okay. Like, it's still a really good program. I mentioned like how much symmetry there is in the athletic department with the head coach and like what a great situation that is and has been. And it's obviously a roster that's still stocked full of talent. I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. I think the worry is if you just hire a coach who's okay, like, I keep seeing like Mark Stoops throwing it, like if it's Mark Stoops and he can win 8 or 9 games a year in the SEC, I think like long-term, you just worry about that. Like, will it be a coach that's good enough to go to the playoff consistently, even an expanded playoff from the SEC? Like, that would be the real concern there. So I don't think it's quite at that level. I certainly understand where you're coming from. And I think I'm in the boat of like Oklahoma very well. I was thinking beforehand, they'll probably still be in the playoff most years and kind of like a 10-2 caliber program. Now you just run the risk of, even though you're a great job, you could still make a hire that knocks that down a level, a game, a year, and you're like a 9-3 SEC program. Okay, what does that do for you? Like, if you're a 9-3 SEC program, is that good enough? Are you going to go to the playoff? Will you get eaten alive? Will you turn into slowly over time? I mean, I said Oklahoma might be a rich man's Nebraska. Now, I realize Nebraska was 3-9. It would be a very, very rich man's Nebraska, but you could be a rich man's Nebraska 10 years from now in the SEC. And Texas could be a rich man's Vandy. I mean, that could be what you're looking at right now. So I do think there's some be careful what you wish for here for sure. Boom to the Sooner. Do you think either of the Sooners quarterbacks will go to USC with Lincoln Riley? Well, here is what I would worry about more so than Caleb Williams. I would worry about Malachi Nelson, who is, let me see what Rivals has him, number 1 or number 2 overall in the class of 2023. He's the number 2 player and the number 2 quarterback in the class of 2023. But he's a 5-star quarterback. And guess where he is from? He is from Los Alamitos, California. So Lincoln Riley already has this quarterback lined up from Cali, number 2 player in the class. And that is who I would think is probably going to be coming with Lincoln to the USC job with him. So that's what I would worry about the most if I were USC or if I were an Oklahoma fan. And I've already seen, I think someone threw in the chat, which is just going like crazy right now. I think someone threw in the chat there at one point in time that a couple of these guys have already decommitted, or there was a tweet that one kid had kind of insinuated he may be staying home now instead of coming to Oklahoma. So there's a lot to be concerned with there. But the other thing, like I would say with Oklahoma, if you are an Oklahoma fan, is like you are Oklahoma, which that goes for both the coach and recruits that you'll eventually pull in. It sucks in the short term, definitely, but like you'll be okay. You're going to be okay. And there will be a coach coming in that will be able to recruit. And I would not worry about this being like a terrible, terrible class or anything at that point. Here's MJB Set 93. I appreciate the donation. MJB Set. I saw rumors of OU considering Sonny Dykes for head coach. Is that nonsense? Yeah. So here's the thing. I had that tweet that was from Mac Engel of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, who, again, I don't really know from Adam, other than I know he's a columnist at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And I know when the thing that really rubbed a lot of people on this channel here the wrong way was when he had reported TCU and Houston were close to getting Pac-12 invites and still might within the year. And a lot of people were saying, oh, that's BS. And he's kind of wishy-washy. And I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have a strong opinion there one way or the other. But he is the one that tweeted that, watch out for Sonny Dykes here. Oklahoma has interest and Sonny Dykes has interest in Oklahoma. That could be something that happens. I'm paraphrasing the tweet there. I find that pretty hard to believe because, again, this is going to be a highly coveted job for so many reasons. A highly, highly coveted job, top 5 job in college football, a chance to win at the highest of levels now going into the SEC. You're going to be ahead resource-wise of everybody else. That 20 to 30 million extra dollars per year is going to be significant over time. So, like, Sonny Dykes, I just can't believe would be, like, seriously on the short list at Oklahoma. That blows my mind, and it does seem like maybe there's somebody in Fort Worth trying to float something like that to a local guy to make it sound like spruce up your head coach. Because I came on here on the channel and said when Sonny Dykes got hired, like that to me was very underwhelming. I thought that was a really underwhelming hire for Oklahoma, or for TCU rather. So maybe it's somebody within TCU and Fort Worth circles embellishing something, taking something to run with, or just trying to float something to make that hire sound a little sexier. That would be just some purely reckless speculation on my part. But I would say don't take a lot of that too seriously. I mean, what we've seen from a lot of other tweets, places, I guess it's pretty much all tweets for me. I've just been living on Twitter the last 3 or 4 hours. It's like Cliff Kingsbury was mentioned by Adam Schefter, but he included in that tweet that Cliff Kingsbury has 1 year left on his deal with the Arizona Cardinals. So, like, I don't know. To me, that feels like an agent leaking something to him, trying to work a raise in there for Cliff, trying to get a little extra cash for Cliff, because it makes no sense. I mean, right, like on both sides. Oklahoma watched Cliff flounder in the same conference as them, not being able to field any kind of a defense at all. That feels like hiring like a diet Lincoln Riley. Now, I know Cliff is having a lot of success right now in the NFL. I don't want to take anything away from him. I actually personally really like Cliff. Mainly for just the style, the swag that he has, that picture about a fireplace that we all know about from the NFL draft, right? So I'm not here to try and rain on Cliff, but that just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense from both sides, and would seem to me to be like a money grab potentially from his agent. So other than that, like Mark Stoops has been mentioned, Brent Venables is the name that I would be very, very curious about if I'm an Oklahoma fan, because now obviously I'm just admitting my biases here. So I'm a K-State fan, obviously, alum, and covered the team for 10 years. Brent Venables is a K-State grad. He was a defensive coach under Bill Snyder. At the peak of Bill Snyder's powers, he left after the 1998 season, which was the best team that the K-State ever had. And I would tell you was the best team in college football to never win a national championship. And K-State fans, that's long been the dream to have him come back and be the head coach. Unfortunately, that's never materialized. And he seems to have been just sitting content to make 7 figures as the defensive coordinator at Clemson, be shielded from a lot of the pressure by Dabo, and not have to go be the head coach in a pressure cooker somewhere. But like Oklahoma, that's a job that, again, because of some of the administrative factors there, is less stressful than others that would be at that level. And that's a place that he has been. I'm very intrigued by that. I'm very, very intrigued by that and what happens with Venables. I am seeing Craig in there saying the fan base in Norman hates the guy. He's well qualified, but don't see him in Norman. That's interesting. I didn't know that the Oklahoma fan base didn't like Brent Venables. I'd be curious to know some of the particulars and details on that. Just because he left for Clemson, is that mainly it? Snappy, I'm sorry, Snappy. I'm just seeing your donation here. Snappy with a donation. If you want to be like Snappy, there are so many things happening in the chat right now. If you want to get your question or comment to me, probably going to have to donate to get it up there. You can do so by clicking the $sign below the chat box where it says say something. Snappy AJ, would Sarkisian have been fired if the Sadhorns lost to KSU like happened with TCU and Texas Tech? I don't think so. I know, people will mock the vote of confidence and say the dreaded vote of confidence, but he did get that from CDC, Chris Del Conte, Texas's AD, in the build-up to, I don't even think it was that game. I think it was the week before, right? Before West Virginia, that happened for Texas. I don't think he would have been fired. And I think that's the right decision. Like Texas, you kind of made your bed. You need to lie in it right now. You just, whether this is a good hire or not, which I would argue that it was not, and certainly not worth all the money that you paid and the hassle of getting rid of Tom Herman to swap him out for this. But whatever, either way, you've got to start giving coaches a chance. You can't just be 1 year in, 1 year out as a program and expect that to work. You cannot expect that at all. So I would say that it would not have happened, and it's the right decision. It's smart for it not to have happened. I don't think that was the right way to go. And really, like, ultimately at Texas, like, what's the difference? I mean, I know K-State is not a lot to write home about right now, as much as it pains me to say that. But it's not like losing to Kansas, which is far worse, and that loss already happened, and he survived that and didn't get fired. So there was nothing on the line there. They weren't going to go to a bowl if they lost or won. So to me, it didn't make any sense to fire him after that. So definitely understand the question, but I don't think that was going to happen. Texas fans, I'm sure, are taking a little bit of was it Schadenfreude? However you pronounce that word. I'm sure they have a little bit of that, laughing at Oklahoma right now, but tough to be in that glass house and trying to throw stones right now. Thank you for the donation, DJ. I see DJ chipping in there with a donation. If you want to be like DJ and donate, you click the $ below the chat box. Apologies there. My camera does that about every 20 minutes. So you'll see it here once again before the chat is actually over. Okay, we have a little bit of a break in the action here. So let me get back to the outline that I had, which I knew was not going to totally follow this. I teased on this video, like, the why here. The why. Why does this happen? Why does Lincoln Riley choose to go to USC? And I think included in that has to be why did he turn down LSU? There's no other way to frame this other than Lincoln Riley turned down Oklahoma and LSU. He turned down 2 pretty top-notch college football jobs and 2 pretty top-notch SEC jobs. And the only reason I hesitate on that, I think LSU is the best job in the country. The only reason I hesitate on that is because Oklahoma's job becomes devalued a bit by going to the SEC, as counterintuitive as that may seem. It's just because the life gets so much more difficult. Like, it's such a pretty catbird seat to be in the Big 12, to be able to run that every year, easily get to the playoff, easily win the league, like Lincoln has been doing here for a long time right now. So the job changes when you go to the SEC, and I would have to really think about that, like reconcile, okay, where does it actually land there? But I don't think that it's totally fair. Anybody that's saying, like, hey, Lincoln's scared of the SEC, is running away. I already saw, like, Clay Travis getting out there and floating that narrative. And I'm sure from SEC circles, that's going to be what you hear a ton of. I would just say this. I think it's clear that was a prime motivation here. And we'll probably never hear that from Lincoln Riley. He released a statement through Oklahoma within the last hour. I can read you that, but it basically said this was based solely on wanting a new challenge. I don't think we'll ever hear, like, it's because I didn't want to go coach in the SEC. But I don't think it's him being scared. I think it's him just being smart. And I know that'll go against, like, a lot of the SEC flavor and narrative here. And I'm sure there are tons of SEC fans in here right now because we have so many people in this chat at the moment. It's just smart business. Like, we all know, I'm a Big 12 fan. I get very disgruntled, upset at the SEC love sometimes. I think ESPN has helped prop up the SEC and turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy over the years, but there's no denying it is the best conference. It is the most difficult conference, and that is going to be a beast, and it will be definitively harder to make the playoff, even in an expanded playoff, in the SEC as opposed to the Pac-12 South. There's no contest there. And if you're Lincoln and you look at this and say, man, I'm going to be going in, even with Oklahoma and everything that I have with the administration, which you're taking a chance on USC, where the administration has not been good for a long time, and that's really hurt them. But even having said all of that, I'm going into the SEC. I'm going to be competing now all of a sudden with Alabama, with LSU, with Georgia, with Florida, all of these different programs. Or I could compete with Oregon and Utah. Like someone in the chat brought up earlier, Utah being the stands to be the biggest loser in all of this. Yes, and when that's what we're talking about, no offense to Utah at all, I have a lot of respect for their program, but that is a much different animal than talking about competing with, even if you throw Oregon in there too, much different animal than talking about competing with Georgia, Bama, LSU, Auburn, Florida, et cetera, in the SEC. I mean, heck, even, Kentucky right now, like Mark Stoops in Kentucky, like you're having to compete with them a lot as one of the lower tier schools in the SEC. Like, that's pretty tough. It's just, life is so much more difficult there. And in terms of you as a head coach, especially if you're Lincoln at Oklahoma right now, expectations are going to stay the same, but your life is getting more difficult. So how do Oklahoma fans adjust if all of a sudden you're going 8-4, 9-3, and trying to get your feet under you in the SEC? Your job security goes down. So, this is now going to a place where you're going to be the guy. You're going to be the king. You've already established West Coast recruiting ties there, and you're a guy that you're proven. Like, you'll be able to win with the resources at USC. Like, the resources at USC, it's going to be just as good, if not better, than Oklahoma. Certainly on par. You'll be able to take that show on the road. Like, you can just see how that translates very, very easily, and you'll be doing it at a place where the clock resets. You'll be a hero for getting them even in the playoff conversation right now. And that's an easy one competition-wise to keep rolling, much like what you've had in the Big 12. Like, I think that, frankly, has to be a lot of it. He liked the situation in the Big 12 where he could be the catbird. He could be the school every year. They could just run the league. They could dominate it and then take that show on the road to the playoff. And I think that's clearly what he wants. So I would call it pretty smart business as opposed to being scared of the SEC. And LSU, I mean, the part with LSU is easier to me than Oklahoma. Like, I would imagine in Lincoln's mind, it was number 1 USC, number 2 Oklahoma, and a distant third LSU. And that's, even though I think LSU is the best job in the country, it's also a job where you can win the national championship, and less than 2 years later, you're canned. You're out of there. So Lincoln has to be looking at that like, man, I'm going to go from Oklahoma right now in the Big 12, where I can just cruise and win the league every year and then float to the playoff. And I've got to go to the most pressure-packed job in the country at LSU, where even a dope like Les Miles can win a national championship. Like, it's that good. So the expectations are that high. Like, nah, no thanks. I'll take a similar payday, go live a cushier lifestyle out on the West Coast in LA with a little bit less pressure and way less competition. So to me, that's what this is about. And the why is pretty clear to read into here, even if we'll never hear that from Lincoln Riley himself. I don't know that there's another explanation possible other than that being the why. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think it's actually a very smart business decision. And I think it kind of collides with what we're seeing in college football in general right now, which is a move toward coaches thinking about these things more like that instead of just jumping for the job with the greatest prestige. Coaches see what's happened to Ed Orgeron and like how quickly that goes downhill and how much pressure there is at LSU or Florida, where Dan Mullen goes to 3 New Year's Six Bowls and then has one bad year and gets run out of town at Florida. And then we saw coaches like turning down those jobs, and the Luke Fickles and Matt Campbells of the world being very patient here. That just seems like the way everything's going, man. It seems like the way everything's going, and this decision is in line with that. I don't know that it'll get framed like that nationally very much, but I think it should. And I wanted to at least bring that up here. I think it should be framed like that, where this is in line with those coaches that are staying put. Even though Lincoln's moving, he's moving to a better situation for him with similar money, similar resources, and just an easier path to the playoff every single year. So I actually think it's very smart by Lincoln. Ted, I've got to get caught up here on some donations. Ted, thank you for the donation. Much appreciated. Says, given the rule changes in recent years in college football, does it make any sense at all to hire a defensive coach? Are most, if not all, games decided by offense? I mean, it feels to me like we're getting more balanced on that. For instance, like I could say, Ted, in the Big 12, where a league that I covered for 10 years, it's very much moved more toward being defensive centric. And I know Oklahoma is still kind of the outlier on that with Lincoln Riley, but Oklahoma State is the team that's in legitimate playoff contention right now, and it's all about defense. It's all about Jim Knowles and his defense at OSU. Baylor is playing a lot of defense right now, and they're the other team that's kind of fringe playoff contention right now with 2 losses this year. It's been about defense for those schools, and there's been more of a transition to that. Matt Campbell, hot name in the Big 12. They play great defense at Iowa State. So I think you're seeing some of that. What's been the talk of college football all year this year? It's Georgia's defense. So I don't think it necessarily has to be an offensive coach. And that's kind of why I brush back at like the talk of Cliff Kingsbury. Like, don't try and just go recreate Lincoln Riley. I think Oklahoma can go hire somebody that is a defensive mind, is a more balanced coach. I don't think it has to be like superstar offensive whiz kid. I don't think you have to try and recreate exactly what you had with Lincoln there. But that is the pain in losing Lincoln, is that he was that dude. Will, thanks for the donation, Will. People forget the last time USC had a good coach, they went to the Rose Bowl in down years and national championship games in up years. Yes, this is a job that no doubt is a turnaround job right now. The roster, even though USC can recruit pretty well and still has had like top 25 classes under Clay Helton, it wasn't what USC wanted it to be. That was a big sticking point. it's not quite the roster that you would anticipate USC would have, but that can change real quick with Lincoln Riley. And again, when the competition is not that stiff around you, easier to build up wins, build up confidence, get that momentum going. He already has some 5-star recruits that I'm sure he'll be able to flip and get the ball rolling from that standpoint very quickly at USC that were lined up to go to Oklahoma, that were from SoCal. I don't imagine it will take very long. And that is just one of those jobs. It's like a sleeping giant job to the extreme, to the nth degree, whereas you get somebody in there that knows what they're doing, that will turn around very, very quickly. And I have no doubt, zero doubt in my mind that that'll happen with Lincoln. Zero doubt in my mind about that at all. Boom to the Sooner. Is it possible that, and thank you for the donation again, Boom to the Sooner, much appreciated. Is it possible that Stoops wanted a break and had an agreement for Riley to move on once he was established and Stoops was ready to come back to Oklahoma? I highly doubt that, just because I think like there's so much ego that goes into it that would make that really hard to pull off or like stick to that. Like thinking that Lincoln, as a coach looking out for himself would want to do that. I think it would always be about the right move for Lincoln. But I do think there's some level of insulation there with having Bob Stoops still involved and still around the program and still just being there to help and be someone Lincoln can bounce ideas off of and now step in a la Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin, right, in a time of need to help steady the program while they wait for the next guy. I think there's obviously a closer relationship there than just your average legendary head coach who left the program. Like, for instance, K-State, like Bill Snyder has not had that same level. I don't, he has just not been around the program a ton in the same respect that it appears like Stoops had with Lincoln Riley. Now, some of that, Lincoln was an assistant under Bob and like kind of the handpicked guy there. So there are differences there, but I think there is a relationship there. I don't think it's that. I wouldn't read into it that it's that. And again, I think with Oklahoma's resources, I think you can go hire somebody young, hungry, and just ready to get after it more than Bob Stoops would be at this stage in his life and or career. Now, I also say that fully realizing like K-State hired Bill Snyder a second time. I saw that happen in front of my eyes. I was not a fan of it when it happened. And within 3 years of him taking back over the job that was like a 500 program, he had them ranked number 1 in the BCS rankings. So it can happen even if you think that it may not work. And after you, again, Boom to the Sooner said, hey, Bob Stoops is going to be the coach at Oklahoma again a couple of weeks ago, and I laughed at you. Now that he's here in an interim role, you were technically right about that. So I'm not going to just completely trample that idea. But no, I would think that that's pretty highly unlikely. Snappy AJ. Let's see. Snappy AJ. Appreciate the donation, Snappy AJ. Snappy AJ says, could you see Oklahoma State winning the Big 12 but being kept out of the playoff, sparking a big push for expansion? Feels like 2011 and even has the questionable loss to ISU. Well, yes, although Iowa State fans, this is some credit to you guys. A much different program than you were in 2011. That's a much different loss for Oklahoma State than it was in 2011. Very much more respectable right now. Could I see it happening? Yes, but the way that happens, I will say, I don't think that happens unless Bama beats Georgia. If Bama beats Georgia, then Oklahoma State is in trouble, and that would be your nightmare scenario. But Bama is so flawed, man. And I know Georgia's strength of schedule has not been anything crazy, especially with the way Clemson wound up faring this year. But Bama just looks so flawed. We've seen it against Florida. We've seen it against LSU. We've seen it against Arkansas. We saw it Saturday against Auburn in a game that Auburn just – I could rant for 20 minutes about Brian Harsin and how they blew that game. So I think you're in pretty good shape there as long as Oklahoma State takes care of business in the Big 12 title game. And I also think expansion is headed there anyway. Here are two things, Snappy AJ, and you won't be surprised by this, I don't think. One, I think it's like obvious that expansion is on the way. It's very obvious that expansion is coming. And two, Oklahoma State and a team from the lowly Big 12, right, I don't think would be enough to really spark enough momentum for it to happen. If it weren't going to happen and you needed something to be the difference, you needed some case study to be the difference there, I don't think Oklahoma State would be enough of a rallying cry for people to have that happen. Like, we've just seen too many times in the Big 12 the disrespect that comes to this conference and anybody that's not named Oklahoma or maybe Texas. So I don't think that would be enough, unfortunately. As much as I would love for it to be, I don't think it would, but I still think expansion is going to come regardless. And frankly, we probably should be getting an update on that pretty soon, right? But Yeah, that would be my take on that, and I appreciate the donation, Snappy AJ. I see John Lewis with the donation. I don't see a comment attached to that, John Lewis. I'm going to scroll up here and see if maybe you tried to leave one and it didn't go with it. No, I don't see one. So just being kind with the donation, much appreciate that. Much appreciate that. If you want to get your question or comment to my attention in what is a wild chat room here, more people by far than we've ever had in a live chat tonight going right now. If you want to make sure that your question or comment gets in, you can donate by clicking the $sign below the chat box where it says say something. And let me just say, since we have so many people in here, I thank you. Thank you, everybody who is here for joining. If you're somebody that has not typically done it or been involved in this is your first time seeing the channel, I talk college football all week on the channel. It is generally pretty geared toward Big 12 centric content and college football conference realignment content, but we'll definitely branch out and talk about the bigger picture, especially when it's a massive story like this. So I'd encourage you to check out everything else that is on the channel, and please do consider subscribing if you have not. If you want just a great college football place to come here on the internet, do live chats twice a week, and other video content in between as well. So would really, really appreciate you subscribing to the channel. Let's see. Josh Heupel back to Norman. I see Gator Zone. Thank you for the donation, Gator Zone. Josh Heupel back to Norman. Definitely could see that happening. And I know Tennessee fans are that's another name that I've seen linked. I should have included that on like the list when I was kind of going over what I've seen linked to Oklahoma. Josh Heupel, former quarterback at Oklahoma, a guy that I hated growing up because, man, he ripped my heart out as a K-State fan twice, beating top 5 K-State with game day on hand in 2001 in Manhattan, and then beating him again in the Big 12 championship game that year that I attended, and was about as cold as I've ever been in a football game in my life. But he's done a wonderful job at Tennessee this year. Wonderful job at Tennessee. So that he's a guy that is like, I don't know, has he done it long enough? Like, can Oklahoma get a more established candidate? I would think that they probably could. Lane Kiffin, I see somebody in here. Chantry Stark, Lane Kiffin to Oklahoma. Lane Kiffin is certainly somebody that I think would be willing to pop in some Twitter jokes, some Twitter speculation about it, because he was driving around Louisiana. I believe recruiting is what he was actually doing tonight, but he was posting pictures of a Louisiana license plate and the Superdome, which is hilarious with the LSU job open and some of that speculation there. He is certainly stoking the flames of that fire and being great at personally spurring on his brand, which I commend him for. Oklahoma, that seemed... Look, I think he'd have success there. I would be 100% here for it from an entertainment standpoint. I don't know. Oklahoma seems like they are a bit too serious for that, right? Like, they've just had Lincoln, who's kind of the opposite, like personality-wise, very much more calm, quiet, laid back, not eccentric, self-promoter like Lane Kiffin. That seems like the total opposite and maybe not what Oklahoma would want. Also a guy who could be a job jumper or, flight risk, going to the NFL, whatever it might be, where he would use that as a launching pad for. And Oklahoma's been a place with a lot of stability from Stoops to Lincoln Riley to now. I think there are a lot of reasons that doesn't make a ton of sense, even though raw talent-wise, I think he definitely belongs in the discussion and is like an Oklahoma caliber coach. An Oklahoma caliber coach for sure. Saw someone saying that 900 people were in here and there were only like 86 likes on the video. I don't know if that's supposed to be a slam or if you're encouraging people to like the video, but I would say, yes, please do like the video. If you're in here right now, like the video. It helps me with that, with the algorithm. So consider subscribing if you haven't. And please like the video. David Z. Late tonight. Okay. I know you always say this. My name isn't David. I need you to explain. It's DAVOD. I need you to explain how it is that you pronounce your name, because I feel bad every time. I don't know how else to say it. Says LOL at OU. John, is there any other way to support your work outside of these chats? I miss 85% of the lives. Well, first of all, I appreciate your support coming in there with that right now. I will tell you one thing that's been on like the back burner of my list this whole time. I'm going to get a Patreon here at some point where you will be able to donate monthly in exchange for some kind of exclusive content. And a part of the holdup on that has been massive life change that I made in moving and changing day jobs here. another part of it has been coming up with what that content is going to be. But I will definitely give you that opportunity with a Patreon where you could subscribe and chip in something monthly, and I will get that to you soon for sure. I promise. I promise. I promise. I promise. I am actually moving into my permanent place of living here on Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. And once that happens, I will be pretty well established in the new life here, and so expect it shortly after that. But for now, yes, donating here is certainly one way to do it. Hey, I could give you my Venmo. I suppose I could do that too, but I'll try and I like to give you something in exchange for it, which I can do pretty easily with the Patreon. So hopefully we'll do that. Nighttime, it's interesting. Nighttime, I see you pop up in the chat with this Kurtz equals the Big 12 voice. I thought about in branding this channel. I think the better branding move for this channel would be to say voice of the Big 12, right? But it feels very pretentious to me. I don't want to say like I am the voice of the Big 12. So if you can come up with some kind of better way to market the channel and market what it is that we're doing here that is not quite all the way in on that, that would be great, because I just don't want to be, I don't want to be that guy. I try to be as humble as I can, even if I'm going to be a cocky SOB sometimes and, talk some major bleep on Twitter, which a lot of people have found out here recently. Which, man, God, like Iowa State fans, let me say this. Iowa State stands to be one of the winners from Lincoln Riley to USC, because the talk had really, really heated up about Matt Campbell to USC, which the whole time I thought, like, that just seems like the least Matt Campbell kind of job possible. This is a guy who is supposedly wanting to stay like in the Midwest footprint. That's basically where he's been his whole life. He genuinely is that kind of guy with like those sort of Midwestern values and sensibilities and all of that. West Coast thing, USC didn't make sense. Now, I will still contend, and this is where things have gotten off course with me and Iowa State fans and why they all hate me right now. I mean, I still think Campbell clearly has been listening a little bit to jobs based on the reporting from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and then all the national guys starting to kick up with, hey, USC and John Wilner is as plugged into the Pac-12 as anybody, saying USC and Matt Campbell, like that's probably what's going to happen here. That to me tells me there was at least a little something to it. And I think that's mainly because of the timing that Campbell was losing this massive class. Breece Hall's probably going to the NFL. They're losing Purdy. They're losing Mike Rose, all these studs, Charlie Kolar that they've had now. And it's probably going to be a dip here for a year or two. Like, this would be the time to strike if you're going to take a job. And the USC job is so compelling that it would make sense he would at least listen. I still had a hard time thinking he would actually take that job. But now that USC basically like elevated a level above there with that coaching hire, now it's like, all right, well, that takes away the one everybody was linking Campbell to. And Florida's now already hired somebody. LSU, I would think, is a job that considers itself above a Matt Campbell. So it's all working out pretty well, I would say, for Iowa State fans. And I know that kind of blanking on his name. What is it? Chris Williams, one of those guys, a Cyclone fanatic that hates me, but is obviously very well plugged in, has already said tonight that he had a couple of sources telling him that Campbell was staying at Iowa State, although not sure if it was going to be with an extension or what. So, look, great news for Iowa State fans, and honestly, great news for the new Big 12 that Campbell would be missed in this cycle. And it does, like, hey, fair point to Iowa State fans. Like, if this cycle where all these jobs are open, Florida, LSU, USC, now Oklahoma, if they go through that entire cycle and Campbell doesn't get scooped up by somebody, yeah, very well, may well be there for a very long time. And unless it is one of those couple of jobs that supposedly would really tickle his fancy in terms of moving on. So Iowa State stands to be a pretty big winner with the way this is played out. Now, I did see also a question in there, and I'll remind you, if you want to make sure your question or comment gets up to the top, just donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. But I did see somebody ask about Matt Campbell to Oklahoma. Part of the reason I haven't gone too far into that is because, again, I saw earlier tonight, I had a bunch of people sending me, I guess I have like Iowa State sources now. Like, everybody thinks I'm so ingrained in Iowa State fans here at this point in time. But I got that sent to me, and I have no reason to not trust that information. Plus, I didn't really see the USC thing in the first place, and that was the one job where all the national smoke had been, and now that's taken up. So I don't know. I just didn't get too far down that road. I haven't seen anybody legitimately linking Campbell there. All the momentum seems to have gone tonight in the opposite way, away from the Oklahoma job. It would make sense to me if Oklahoma wanted to try that out, but I don't know. Even then, he's a guy, Matt Campbell legitimately just said within the last few weeks, like his goal this year and the team's goal wasn't to win a Big 12 championship. I don't know if does that kind of comment fly at Oklahoma? It just makes me wonder like how Oklahoma would really perceive that. But I guess it's probably not totally out of the question. And I think he would definitely have some success there. Clearly he's recruited in the Big 12 footprint already. And he's got a top 30 class right now coming into Iowa State to Ames, Iowa. So I would figure that would translate pretty well to Oklahoma. But no, I would be pretty shocked. I would be pretty shocked if that were to happen. I don't think that is going to happen. Jeremy says, OU fan here, hate the conference move, value the tradition with the Big 12. What is your take on Mark Stoops to Oklahoma has elevated Kentucky? Yeah, Jeremy, appreciate the donation and thanks for being in here. I just think Mark Stoops is underwhelming to me, and I don't mean that as a sign of disrespect to what Mark Stoops has done at Kentucky. Clearly, he's done an excellent job and has proven himself to be very much worthwhile at Kentucky. And let me, Mark Stoops, I'm going to check out his Wikipedia page here because I believe he's been an assistant. He's been a high-level assistant, right, at Florida State. I was going to say he was with Jimbo. At Florida State, he's been a coach at Miami. So, like, he's recruited at big-time jobs before, too. So maybe I shouldn't discount him as much just because of that. But I would just think I get the family connection, obviously, with the Stoops last name to Oklahoma, and he has been successful there. But I don't know. He didn't get much run at USC. He didn't get much run at seemingly LSU. He hasn't gotten much run for, at Florida. Like these major jobs that have been close and around him, like a couple of SEC jobs didn't seem interested enough to make big runs at him. So would that be good enough for Oklahoma? I don't know. It just, to me, I'll tell you what Mark Stoops seems like to me. That seems like the Sonny Dykes TCU kind of hire, where it felt like TCU was swinging, taking some bigger swings, looking for something bigger, and they kind of landed on that as like a backup plan. And maybe that probably is not how TCU really approached it the whole time. But to me, that's kind of how it felt about, like, I don't know. It seemed like TCU could do better than a guy who flamed out at Cal, regardless of what the circumstances were there. And it feels to me like Oklahoma could probably do better than a guy who wins 8 games a year at Kentucky, even though I understand that that's a difficult job and all of that. I think Oklahoma could probably do better, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. That to me feels like a safe kind of hire. A safe kind of hire instead of taking maybe safe is the wrong word, a lower upside. I think the upside is lower on Stoops than a lot of the names that are being mentioned at Oklahoma. That is probably the best way to say it. I don't feel like the upside with Mark Stoops is as high as many of the other names that have been mentioned at Oklahoma and many of the other names that they could realistically go get. That's what I think on that one. So appreciate the donation. And if you want to donate and get in here as well with your question or comment, you can click the $ below the chat box to do so where it says say something there. I guess I can run through. I'm looking at what I haven't clicked off here on the list. Brent Venables, I already talked about him. Alex Grinch, I would guess, would get an interview, but I don't think would be a serious candidate. Cliff Kingsbury seems to me like an agent money grab. Sonny Dykes was mentioned in the Mac Engel tweets. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, those are the only real names that I've seen, but I wouldn't put it past. I mean, like USC, nobody was talking about Lincoln Riley really to USC before this happened. Oklahoma's a big enough job that I wouldn't put it past them to pull somebody that we're just not thinking of or talking about right now because that is such a good job. And somebody will think that they can go take them into the SEC and dominate and be a really high-profile coach at a high-profile job in the SEC here. So I would not put it past Oklahoma to go pull a major name that we're not even thinking of right now. Tommy. And again, a part of this is because Joe Castiglione is like one of the most widely respected athletic directors in college athletics. Very, very well thought of. So I think that will help Oklahoma a lot here in this search. And he is the guy, right, that hired Bob Stoops back in 1999. So he's proven he can be successful in a coaching search before. Anyway, Tommy says TCU fans agree with you on Sonny. Maybe OU will take a chance on Dion. Tommy, I appreciate the fact that you just donated to get that comment in. That is awesome. I appreciate that a lot. Yes, obviously a reference there to Deion Sanders, who TCU at least gave somewhat the time of day to in their coaching search before landing on Sonny Dykes. Yeah, I don't know. Like, look, if I were a TCU fan, I wouldn't be crazy down on the hire necessarily, but I think that's a pretty good job. And I think you can argue it's maybe the best job in the new Big 12 once that gets rolling because of the proximity to the DFW area being right there and everything in Texas and the fact that you've won 12 games there this decade. You've had 3 11-plus win seasons. You guys know my whole spiel about the TCU job. I think it's a great job. I think it's a fantastic job. And so to land on Sonny Dykes felt to me like, eh. But I think TCU was also really hurt by just the competition out there for resources right now, like the competition out there for other coaches. Because you have Florida, LSU, now Oklahoma, USC, all these other major jobs open, like Billy Napier, for instance. Billy Napier is one of those names being linked somewhat to TCU at first. Billy Napier is a name that I think in like a less hectic, less crazy coaching cycle where there was less open, that might be a job where you were able to land Billy Napier to come be your coach. But instead, this year, Florida was open and Florida didn't have quite it didn't swing as big of a stick with some of those major, massive names. And so they landed on Billy Napier, and that pulls them away from a job like TCU. So I do think that factored into it as well. Again, apologies for the camera flicker there. So, okay. If we have more Lincoln Riley comments, reaction, etc., be sure to get it in. You can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. Now, okay, now there's a name. I tell you what, I say that and I glance down at the chat box and I see Jay, one of the rare ones who's not donated that's going to get in here because I like seeing this, and this is a very intriguing name. Jay says Mario Cristobal to Oklahoma. Mario Cristobal to Oklahoma. Whew, now that's an interesting one. Miami, I don't. Is Manny Diaz going to survive? Like, are we still thinking Cristobal to Miami potentially? That would be another interesting scenario brought up there possibly. But Cristobal could definitely recruit. And I know I see people saying Cristobal wants Miami according to sources. Obviously, I get all of that. That's home for him. But Oklahoma's one of those jobs where like nobody thought it would be open, and it's good enough that you may look at it if you're Cristobal and say, well, Lincoln Riley's now coming to be my competition if I stay at USC. Maybe now I go to Oklahoma. Maybe I kind of flip-flop there, and now I don't have to deal with that, and I can go take a better job than Oregon. As good a job as Oregon is, it's clearly a step above what Oregon is. And maybe I just get out of Lincoln Riley coming to be my competition and go take the OU job. I don't know. If I'm Oklahoma, I am certainly taking my shots at guys like that. Like I would be sniffing around. Chris Peterson, I saw somebody mention Chris Peterson at one point earlier, and like I would make the phone call. And see if a guy like that is interested because it is such a good job. And like the way that you just lost your coach, the lesson that Oklahoma should learn and take from this is the way that you just got your coach was because USC was not afraid to pick up the phone and at least make a guy like Lincoln Riley say no. Like make a guy who seemingly would be out of your league say no to that job. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. I think Oklahoma should be going and looking at candidates like that as much as they possibly could because it is a blue blood, truly elite job. And that's why I think this will be a really fascinating search to watch. If it winds up with a guy like Mark Stoops, that would be very disappointing to me, much like the TCU thing where I was like, oh, this could be very interesting here. Deion Sanders, how about that? And then it's like, oh, Sonny Dykes. Okay. It would be a very similar type of reaction to Mark Stoops from me, if that's what happened. We just hit the 1,000 mark here in the chat. Thank you to everybody that's hanging out here. A couple donations that I'm going to get to real quick. If you are new and you have not subscribed to the channel, I would encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel. I talk college football all week here on this channel, generally from a Big 12 viewpoint, a lot of conference realignment talk as well here on this channel. But we talk college football. We have a really good time. I do 2 live chats a week and give you some other content interspersed in there as well. So I would definitely appreciate your consideration there for a subscription if you have not subscribed. And please do give that video a like if you're in here right now. That definitely helps me out too. So Steven, thank you for the donation. I can tell that Steven is an Iowa State fan from the colors there. Steven says, why does Chris Williams hate you for your talk about Iowa State? Well, look, I have, as a K-State fan, been a part of some of the back and forth on K-State Twitter. and Iowa State Twitter, which I'm sure to some of the more national college football fans in here that would like solicit an eye roll, like K-State, Iowa State. It all started with like just some friendly back and forth that's turned into a more heated rivalry over time. And I think the thing that got everybody really upset recently was it was the TCU stuff. It was the Fort Worth Star-Telegram reporting that Matt Campbell at least was listening a little bit to TCU in that process and was being considered there for a second. Now, clearly at some point that interest fizzled. But I just took that information and said it makes sense that he would listen because I think TCU has a higher upside than Iowa State. And that made it to their podcast and boards and all their fans on Twitter. And so that is really where I took a lot of heat and was hearing it again today from Iowa State fans celebrating Campbell not moving here at this point in time. So like, it's just kind of exhausting to me at this point in time. I never said I thought he was going to take the TCU job. I just simply said, I understand why he would listen. It feels like he's hit kind of a ceiling at Iowa State. He's losing this massive senior class right now. The timing would be right. And I think TCU is a job with a higher ceiling. So I could see why he would at least pick up the phone and be willing to listen for a little bit there, even if he ultimately didn't take the job. So that is why. And I just, at this point, like, can we just be friends? Can we be friends? Do we have to keep fighting and bickering about this? Will both of our teams sit here at 7-5 at the end of the 2021 season? I digress. Here's Juan with the donation. Thank you, Juan, a guy who's kind of an OG here on the channel. Juan says, please tell me Houston's head coach and defensive coordinator are safe until next year at least. You know what's funny about that, Juan, is somebody – some Oklahoma fan, right? No, not an Oklahoma fan, maybe a Texas fan. Someone had photoshopped Ron Prince, the former K-State head coach, who was a disaster, photoshopped his face onto a guy wearing an Oklahoma polo. And then I saw someone in the comments saying, no, what it actually should be is this. And it was a photoshopped Dana Holgorsen face onto a guy wearing an Oklahoma polo, insinuating that Holgorsen should be the next guy at Oklahoma. I don't think there's going to be any serious talk about that, but I have not heard any Dana Holgorsen rumors, and frankly, I probably should know this one, but I don't know enough about the defensive coordinator at Houston or what the situation there is to know if that's going to be anything. So I can't give you a good answer to that other than I think Holgorsen is probably safe for now. And I would imagine most people are looking at it like, okay, let's see this over multiple years, Holgorsen, because it had taken some buildup, right, to get to this year and what they've accomplished at Houston. But let me give you one caveat to this. That changes a lot if Houston wins on Saturday. If Houston beats Cincinnati and disrupts the Cincinnati playoff train here and does it in front of what will be a very large audience, now we may be talking about something because, ADs and fan bases get really excited and, starry-eyed over wins like that. That's something that can really change the narrative. If all of a sudden you do that and now Houston's in line potentially for a New Year's Six Bowl, that could really change it. So for now, I think you're okay. If you go out and beat Cincinnati, which would be an incredible high for the program, we may be talking about something different. So that's what I would have to say about that. And thank you for hanging out and being here, Juan. If you want to be like Juan, make sure your question or comment gets up to the top. You can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says, say something. Oh, there we go. Juan again. Juan, thank you for the donation, man. That is way too kind of you. Juan says the DC at Houston is Doug Belk. And yes, that's my worry. Yeah. Okay. So Doug Belk, that would be like the type of name I would think, with the job that Houston's put together. Again, if they win, that's probably another one where, this is not going to assuage your fears at all. But if Houston beats Cincinnati, that rising tide lifts all boats. Holgorsen's star will shine brighter, and so will Belk's, and there will be more attention paid to it. And then he could potentially get plucked and get rated there. But I don't know. I think Dana's probably going to stay put. There just has not been enough buzz for me yet, and there are enough major jobs open where like big candidates are out there. I wouldn't worry too terribly much about it, but I understand why the worry comes. And what a dramatic change. That would be my other comment. What a dramatic change, because I don't remember if it was you specifically, Juan, but I remember some Houston fans early on just not thrilled. After that second half against Texas Tech, it was like people seemed to be out on Dana and ready to go. And I can see the West Virginia fans that are in the chat here commenting on Dana right now, like, oh, Dana was a disaster. Dana was terrible. So funny how fast all that can change, but certainly it's deservedly so with what's happened there. I see Craig Campbell staying at Iowa State. Sure seems like it right now. That's what some of the Iowa State sites are reporting and saying right now. And USC seem to be the one that the national guys are really linking him to. So I think Iowa State is going to be a big winner in this. Now, we need to talk about this. The Lincoln Riley to USC reverberations hit the Pac-12, and that in turn hits the Big 12. Because if you've been following this channel most of the year, you know that like one of the big talking points and storylines has been the frustration that we all had about the fact that everybody in the national media seemed to just brush aside anybody in the Big 12 for a while there and say like, well, there's no way they'll be able to compete with the Pac-12 and the ACC and obviously the Big 10 and the SEC moving forward now. The remnants of this conference, even if they add these 4 teams, like no one will be able to compete. And that's what the rallying cry here has been. No, that's ridiculous. Of course, the new Big 12 can compete with the Pac-12 and the ACC on the field. And we've had the composite computer rankings every week showing that the Pac-12 and ACC both were woefully behind the Big 12 this year in terms of average team rank based on where they're at in the computer rankings. Now we sit here at the end of the season with the Big 12, 4 of the top 13 teams in the playoff rankings, and that probably will look even a little bit better in the final rankings that come out, or the rankings before Conference Championship Saturday. 4 of the top 13, 2 legitimate playoff contenders. There is a realistic scenario where the Big 12 has 2 of the 4 playoff teams this year, and the ACC and the Pac-12 have nothing. Nobody in the top 13. Nobody close. So it's been a wonderful year for the Big 12 as far as that is concerned, and it is clearly proven that that was a ridiculous premise, that the Big 12 would not be able to keep up with the Pac-12 and the ACC. But, I will say a but. There is a but here. As fun as it can be and as satisfying and sweet as it can be for the rest of us lonely fans in the Big 12 after everything that happened, there is still this. Now the Pac-12, I think, undoubtedly is going to have their major tenant back. This is going to put USC back on the map. They should be a legitimate playoff contender most years. I foresee this going very similarly to the way that it's gone at Oklahoma. Maybe not, I think it will take longer, right? Lincoln's inheriting a different situation than what he inherited at Oklahoma. But I think 5 years from now, you'll be looking at the same thing. Well, probably 3 years from now is a more realistic timeline for that and the way everything moves these days. 3 years from now, USC every year, they're going to win the Pac-12, and they will be a team that's in contention for the expanded playoff at that point. Like they'll be in, and they'll be a team that can compete for a championship legitimately every year. I do think that's going to happen, and that dramatically changes what the Pac-12 is as a conference. That's what they've been missing now. Oregon, even though they had that win over Ohio State this year, I just never trusted them to finish the job. I never figured that was going to happen. And that is the problem. Like Oregon's like a step below where the Pac-12 really needs that team to be. Now you've got the team with the resources, with the coach that can ascend to that level. That makes a big difference. That's really all you need. Because as much as we say like the Big Ten is great, the Big Ten does have some quality depth, like Michigan beating Ohio State this Saturday notwithstanding. Ohio State's that team for the Big Ten. Alabama has been that team for the SEC. Now they have other, Georgia, LSU. The SEC is its own beast. But the Big Ten is at Ohio State. The Clemson has been the ACC's team there. Oklahoma has been that for the Big 12. And the Pac-12 for like 5-6 years has been missing that. Now it appears like they're probably going to have that back with Lincoln Riley here. So that will make the competition tougher for the new Big 12 as far as that is concerned. But again, this year is proving that the league can put viable playoff candidates up there. They can get an Oklahoma State there. They can get a Cincinnati there. So I still think the point stands that they will be very competitive, that they will certainly be very competitive with those 2 other leagues. And we'll see, by the way, what happens with Clemson. Like, is this going to be a legitimate dip here under Dabo, or does he keep it all up and running the same way? But for now, the Pac-12 gains a massive, massive, massive amount by bringing in Lincoln Riley of credibility and of potential for the future and being a league that seems much more viable. And how about, by the way, the TV contract for the Pac-12? I mean, it's another thing we've talked about a lot here. Maybe the money won't even be that much different between the Pac-12 and the Big 12 when their TV contract gets renegotiated within the next 18 months. And now it's going to look a lot better for George Kliavkoff at the negotiating table to say, look, you like USC? People around the country like USC. That's a job that people, or a school that people will watch. Now their coach is Lincoln Riley. That's a guy that's been to the playoff, 3 times? More than the entire Pac-12 had been to the playoff. Lincoln Riley 3, the Pac-12 2. Lincoln Riley's been to the playoff 3 times. That's a national brand going to a national brand. How do you like them apples for a TV contract? That makes a big difference. It makes a big, big, big difference. So that is a storyline worthy of discussion here for sure. We squeeze this one in from Juan, and I see the other donation here. Juan says Lincoln's move is smart. I think it confirms OU and probably UT is going to be a punching bag in the SEC for a while. Thoughts? But I'm going to get to your comment in just a minute. I really appreciate that donation as well. Juan, I don't know that I think Texas very well could be a punching bag. I don't think Oklahoma is going to be a punching bag, but I think there is a scenario out there that is fairly realistic where Oklahoma goes in and turns into Auburn or like a Tennessee, and Texas is, like South Carolina, Arkansas, maybe if Texas is lucky, they can get to like an Arkansas level, but Arkansas has been obviously pretty up and down, more down than up here lately. I think that is a very realistic possibility here because it's not just what these programs are from like a wins losses standpoint right now and how you think that translates, but it's just the extenuating circumstances outside of that. Like Texas is just a mess and a disaster everywhere. And I've told you, I think so much of it stems from too many cooks in the kitchen, all these boosters and people you have to glad hand and make happy with the Texas job, and a lack of patience combined with just a lack of self-awareness, all these things that permeate much more than just the head coach. Those are major issues at Texas, and those aren't going away. And Sark does not appear to me to be this like transcendent guy that can rise above all of that, as we've seen here in the first year. So that's the problem for Texas. And then for Oklahoma, it's you had an elite coach. It is definitely an elite job, but that doesn't mean that you're always going to hire somebody who's at that level. And even if you miss by just half a step here going into the SEC with a program that was already probably going to be devalued by just half a step or so, at least at first, while they found their footing in the SEC, that can be a slippery slope. And then you could lose some relevancy by becoming just a 9-3 program instead of an 11-1 program in the SEC. So that would be my take on it. Bud says, okay, Lincoln Riley lost Saturday. And thank you for the donation, Bud. Very, very generous donation. Says, okay, Lincoln Riley lost Saturday and is gone. Please speculate on Venables. What if Cincinnati, Georgia, and Michigan lose? What are playoff possibilities? So, yeah. Variables. Please speculate on variables. My bad on assuming Venables there. What if Cincy, Georgia, or Michigan lose? Well, Cincy loses, obviously they're definitely out. And unfortunately, that opens the door for the team that they beat earlier this year, Notre Dame. That would be the biggest implication there right away. Michigan losing would be awesome, I think, for Oklahoma State and Cincinnati. Just some more security for them hopping up in there, and also opens the door for a Notre Dame in the playoff, which is, but obviously they've hung around enough to put themselves in that position. Georgia losing, that's the real problem. That's the real problem if Georgia were to lose, because now you're getting Alabama and Georgia into the playoff, and now there are only 2 more spots. Now that could still happen, and then Michigan loses, and Cincinnati and Oklahoma State win, and then you'd be sitting there with Alabama. You'd have Bama, Georgia, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, still a very real possibility. So that's definitely something that could happen there. And Michigan, I think it's a losable enough game to Iowa, but I don't know. If you were hoping for Michigan to lose, I would have rather seen Wisconsin in there. Red hot team, better offensive capabilities. I don't know. Iowa just seems to me to be like the worst 10-2 team ever, but it's kind of what Iowa does. They lull you to sleep with great defense and just win games. They win games. They definitely do that. I can't deny that. XRP Moonshot. Thank you for the donation, XRP Moonshot. XRP Moonshot says, what are your thoughts on the possibility that 3 out of the 4 teams could make the playoffs for the first time this year? Is that 3 out of the 4 teams? I'm a little 3 out of the 4 teams. What do you mean by that? 3 out of the 4 teams. Are we talking like Big 12 teams? Is that throwing in there, lumping in like Baylor being an outside possibility depending on what happens there? Which Baylor I would consider to be like just on the very, very fringe. Okay, yeah. So I see in the chat Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Cincinnati. Yeah, I'm trying to think in my head like what the scenario is, XRP, for that where Baylor gets in, because Notre Dame is done, right? So that's the tough thing. I think you'd have to have you definitely have to have Georgia win. You have to have Michigan lose. And then you'd be looking at Georgia, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati. And then you'd have to be hoping like Baylor. Yeah, but Baylor. So no, but the problem is Baylor's playing in the Big 12 championship game, right? So Oklahoma State wins, then Baylor's going to be done. So yeah, there's. I don't think there's really a possibility of that because Oklahoma State and Baylor are about to play each other in the Big 12 championship game. But I think the possibility and the point being that you could get 2 of the 4. I mean, imagine the world where 2 of the 4 are from the Big 12, like from the new Big 12. If Cincinnati and Oklahoma State are 2 of the 4, like that is insane after all the crap that this conference has taken. For that to be the case would just be unbelievable for the league and just an unbelievable lift for the league. Crazy to think about that. Crazy to think about that. Nighttime, appreciate the shout out and the donation. Nighttime says, gotta go, Kurtz, as usual, great content. Nighttime, one of the biggest supporters here of this channel. Much appreciate you. Is Cincinnati a lock if they win? I see that from Jake. I don't think it's a total lock. Like, look, ask TCU fans about things being a total lock or feeling like it's a total lock going into the last week. And that was with TCU at 3. Not even at 4 in the rankings. They were at 3. So no, it's not a lock. And this is where, damn it, Auburn, like Harsin, come on, man. If you could have just taken care of Bama there, I think everybody would feel a lot better right now about where things were at with that. At least just better, maybe not a lot better, but better. And that is one of the most infuriating results of the weekend. Like, first of all, the poor Auburn kid that I understand that he felt like he could get the first down on that run where he winds up getting thrown out of bounds. And it was a great play by the Bama defender to toss him out of bounds. But God, if you just go down after a couple of yards there, you're winning the game. You're winning the game. And then beyond that, Harsin, the thing that killed me about him is if you have that 2-point play, the throwback to the tight end, which was an excellent play and it worked, then go for 2 at the end of the first overtime. Like, it was clear that you were on borrowed time. I don't understand why that didn't happen there from Harsin. But whatever, it did, and Alabama lives on. It was a hell of a win. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think it's a shoe-in that they make it. But I would say I still think it's like 90-10. I think if Cincinnati wins, I would call it like 90-10 that they do get into the playoff. Michael finally caught a live chat. Thank you for the donation, Michael. Oklahoma State fan, congratulations. Shout out to the Pokes. Michael says, finally caught a live chat. What are your thoughts on the Big 12 announcing expansion in 5 to 10 years to see what programs rise to the top? Thanks, go Pokes. Yeah, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, that's a pretty safe bet. I think in the next 5 years, there'd be a pretty darn good chance of that. I don't think it's anything that happens like really, really soon. And if it is over that large swath of time, if we're talking 5 to 10 years, then things could look pretty different. Like how different, how much have things changed for UCF? You think about the schools that have been added right now, UCF in the last 10 years. Like, how different does that look now as opposed to what it did 10 years ago? Way different. So, a different school could come totally off the radar there. That's kind of where I'm at on that. Have not heard anything more about it, anything happening very quickly here on that front. But yeah, I appreciate you hopping in, and I hope you have absolutely soaked up every last ounce of the last 24 hours being an Oklahoma State fan, because I cannot even imagine, one, the roller coaster of emotions that Bedlam was, but then to win the game and then to see Lincoln leave Oklahoma in the aftermath of that has to be so unbelievably sweet. I just can't even imagine. Juan, thank you for another donation. Juan says, based on what you've seen this season so far, where do you rank the future Big 12 against the rest of the conferences? Yeah, I think this is one of those things that Lincoln Riley does change, where I think now the Pac-12 is much more of a viable player here in this discussion. So that has changed things. If you would have asked me this 24 hours ago, I would say I think the Big 12 and the ACC, because I would still trust that Clemson would be a good enough team to be in the playoff discussion most every year, and then in an expanded playoff, making the playoff every year. I would have said that I would think Big 12 and ACC kind of tied for third, and then the Pac-12 fifth. But now this brings the Pac-12, I think, to a point where they could be closer to where over the next 10 years, I don't even know that I have like a strong feel right now on what would be above one or the other. I think some of it will depend on, can the Big 12 actually win playoff games when the playoff gets expanded to 12. That to me would be the biggest factor there, because it's going to be, they will be totally different. You'd be ranking apples to oranges. You'll be ranking a league with Clemson, a league with USC against the Big 12, which right now doesn't have one of those dominant forces. Now, maybe Cincinnati, UCF, maybe one of those schools kind of turns into that and wins some playoff games over the next 10 years and can be that eventually. But how does that work? Because that will be the thing. The Big 12 is clearly going to have a path to the playoff and be able to get in when it's expanded, but you will have to win games. And I will fully admit, as much as I've been banging the drum on like the Big 12 will be competitive with the ACC and the Pac-12, if not better, I think right now the Lincoln Riley stuff really changes the calculus on this. And I think that will really make it much more of a spectacle to watch over the next 10 years to see how all that goes. And, you know, I mean, who the hell knows what's going to happen with realignment over the next 10 years? Everything changes drastically and wildly within the span of a day right now. And I'm sure the next time I do a chat, as I'm going to wind down, I'll give you the heads up. I'm winding down here, maybe another minute or two left here on this chat. So if you want to get something in and donate, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. You can do so here in the last couple of minutes. But I'm sure by the next time that I talk to you on one of these live chats, which will be either Tuesday or Wednesday this week, more wild things will have happened. Like the coaching carousel is going so crazy right now and out of control. And Lincoln Riley just really shook up the college football world. I'm sure there is a great possibility of something wild happening between now and then. So who knows? I would just say this time of year with what's happening right now, the jobs that are open, you just need to keep your head on a swivel. That is it. Keep your head on a swivel. And we're not even into, you know, just fans of individual teams right now dealing with the transfer portal. Like I'm starting to see this on a hyper local level with K-State. That K-State, the transfer portal is really heating up there. And that's the other thing that's going to happen with all these teams now. And you're going to have so many transactions going on, players coming in, players leaving from different schools, that it's just going to be a wild time in college football and probably give us a ton of content here for a while, which is a great thing. Very, very much here for that. I see Juan with another question in here. Juan, I appreciate it. You think Dabo takes a new job? If so, where? I think the only thing Dabo would do is if Saban decides to hang it up, if Saban were to decide to retire from Alabama, Dabo obviously has the connection there. That would be the only thing I see happening with Dabo. Doesn't strike me as an NFL guy. I don't know that his whole shtick and the way that he coaches would really fly in the NFL anyway. So I wouldn't think that there would be anywhere other than Clemson that works for Dabo. But I mean, hell, I don't know if you're Oklahoma, do you at least pick up the phone? You might at least pick up the phone and see if somebody like Dabo would have any kind of interest there. I see John points out, yeah, Dabo's a Bama alum, so that is why I would think that there's at least a possibility of that if it were to happen. So anyway, think that's going to do it. I'm about talked out here, but there's obviously a ton going on now. Didn't even really get to everything, so I can save some of that for the next live chat. I will reiterate, if you are one of the people in here that is not a subscriber to the channel, if you just discovered it tonight with obviously a very hot button topic that's going on right now, please do consider subscribing to the channel. I'm talking college football all week here. I do 2 live chats a week. I give you other pre-recorded content as well, mainly coming from a Big 12 standpoint, but also a lot of conference realignment talk and a lot of just national college football talk. I'm just going to get kind of a Big 12 spin on it. So if that's something that you're interested in, we're doing a lot of that here, and I would very much appreciate you considering to subscribe. Will, I see. Will, thank you for pointing that out and tagging me. I see I donated $2, but I don't think you saw it. I'm sorry if I missed your question there, Will. I forget to point out sometimes if you don't donate at least $5, it doesn't tag it up at the top. It still just kind of shoots it through the chat just with a little bit of color. So if I don't look, I don't see it. Doesn't mean I don't appreciate that at all, and I should be better about giving you that forewarning there. I appreciate each and every one of you that do hang out here in the chat, and I know it sucks to like donate a little bit of money and have that go past. So my bad on that. Feel badly for that, but stick with me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do share it. If you have friends that you think would be interested in the channel, please do share that. Follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz, JLKURTZ, if you want more up to the date from me. When is the live chat? I see Strange Days. When is the live chat? Sunday evenings, generally around 8 o'clock. And then Tuesday or Wednesday at about the same time. It's flip-flop back and forth a little bit because of the playoff rankings coming out. If it's topical enough with the playoff rankings coming out, I've been doing Tuesday instead of Wednesday. It was Wednesday before that, so I know it's not a perfect answer for you. But definitely subscribe, click the little bell so you can get notified, and you'll be able to figure that out when it is that I do go live. But generally Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday is when you need to be looking out for the live chats. Juan, Patreon. Yes, Juan, I said earlier in the chat to somebody else who asked about this too. Patreon is coming. I swear the move and everything that's been going on in my life that made things really hectic stunted the Patreon progress there. I promise I will get you one. I promise I will get you one. You guys will have a chance to donate that way and get some sort of exclusive content. If you have ideas for exclusive content that you would like as a Patreon subscriber, feel free to hit me up on Twitter with those at @JOKurtz, and you can do that too. All right, stop procrastinating. You're right, Ben. I will stop procrastinating. I am logging off. Thank you guys for a great chat, very lively chat tonight. Share the word about the channel. Follow me on Twitter. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will talk to you guys soon.